Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. How are you? And the topic we are going to discuss today, but patterns of organization, refers to the kind of construction of the body. One of the most striking ordered series of changes in evolution is reflected in the body plans in the animal kingdom and the protist. And the evolution is the change with the passage of time. And evolution changes does not always lead to the complex organisms. Sometimes evolution leads to the simpler ones also. Evolution changes do not always means progress and increased complexity. Evolution frequently results in backtracking, in failed experiments, and inefficient or useless structure. Sometimes, due to the evolution, extinctions also occur. Evolution results in the frequent dead ends, even though the route to the dead end may be filled with grandeur. And what is the symmetry? First of all, we are going to discuss is the symmetry. Symmetry means how the parts of animals are arranged around a point or an axis. Symmetry is the regularity of the form is called the symmetry. There are three types of symmetry: asymmetric, radial symmetry, and bilateral symmetry. The bodies of the animals and protists are organized into almost definitely diverse form. Within this diversity, however, are certain patterns of organization. The concept of symmetry is fundamental to understanding animal organizations. Symmetry describes how the parts of an animal are arranged around a point or an axis. First of all, asymmetry. A body is to be asymmetrical when the body of an animal cannot be divided into two equal halves by any plane. It is the absence of a central point or the axis around which the body parts are equally distributed. It has no adaptive value. It gives no advantage to an organism. No regularity. In case of asymmetry, no regularity of the form. Here in the asymmetrical animals, absence of the central point or the axis around which the body parts are equally distributed. This asymmetrical animals belongs to most of the protists and many sponges, as shown in the diagram. So asymmetry cannot be said to be an adaptation to anything or advantageous to any organism. Asymmetrical organisms do not develop complex communication, sensory or locomotor functions. Clearly, however, protists and animals whose bodies consist of aggregate of cells have flourished. Sea anemone can move along a substrate but only very slowly. You have seen sea anemone. The sea anemone and it has sensory and feeding structure that are uniformly distributed around its body. Sea anemone do not have distinct head and tail ends. Instead, one point of reference is the end of the animal that has mouth, and the end of the animal that contain mouth is the oral end, and the second point of the reference that is opposite end to the mouth is the aboral end. So two ends are present, one end that contains the mouth, the oral end, and second end that is opposite to the mouth is the aboral end. So sea anemones are called the radially symmetrical animals because they contain a body parts that is arranged to the central axis. And this type of symmetry, so sea anemones show symmetry, and this type of symmetry is called the radial symmetry. And what the definition of radial symmetry is, it is the arrangement of the body parts in such a way that any plane passing through the central oral aboral axis divide the animal into mirror images. Arrangement of the body parts in such a way that any plane passing through the central oral aboral axis divide the animal into mirror images is called the radial symmetry, and sea anemones show the radial symmetry. Often modified by the arrangement of some structures in pairs or in other combinations around the central oral aboral axis. The paired arrangement of some structure in radial symmetrical animal is called the biradial symmetry. The arrangement of structure in 5 around a radial animal is called the Pentatosymmetry symmetry. This diagram is of sponge that show asymmetry. Here no symmetry is present in case of the sponges, just a heap of cells is present as shown in the diagram. And the second one is of the sea anemone, that is showing the radial symmetry. A central point is present, and around the central points body structures are present, and any plane passing through the central oral and aboral axis divide the animal into mirror images in case of the radial symmetrical animals. Here the aboral end, and on the above side where the mouth is present is the oral end. Plane passing through the central oral and aboral sides axis divide the animal into mirror images is the radial symmetry, and the animals containing the symmetry radial symmetry are called the radially symmetrical animals, while that of the sponge that doesn't show any symmetry, so they are asymmetrical animals. Sensory feeding and the locomotor structure in the radial symmetrical animals could never be called the simple. They are not comparable to the complex sensory, locomotor, and feeding structures in many other animals. The evolution of such complex structure in radially symmetrical animals would require repeated distribution of specialized structure around the animal. And starfish show the pentaradial symmetry, while that of the ctenophorans, Pleurobranchia show biradial symmetry. These are two diagrams, two animals showing. Here the starfish that show pentaradial symmetry. The arrangement of structure in 5 around a radial animal is called the pentaradial symmetry. Example is the echinoderm. Starfish belong to the phylum Echinodermata. And the second one is the Pleurobranchia, or the animals belonging to phylum Ctenophora, show biradial symmetry. The pair arrangement of some structures in radially symmetrical animal is called the biradial symmetry. And examples, members of phylum Ctenophora. Next is the bilateral symmetry. This is the arrangement of body parts such that a single plane passing between the upper and the lower surfaces and through the longitudinal axis of an animal divides the animal into right and the left mirror images. In case of the radial symmetrical animals, we have discussed about the oral and the aboral ends. Now, in case of the bilateral symmetrical animals, we are discussing about the right and the left mirror images, not the oral and the aboral points. Bilateral symmetrical animals. Bilateral symmetry is the characteristics of active, crawling or swimming animals. Because bilateral animals move primarily in one direction, one end of the animal is continually encountering the environment. The end that meets the environment is usually where complex sensory, nervous, and feeding structures evolve and develop. These developments result in the formation of a distinct head and are called the cephalization. Formation of a head is called the cephalization. Cephalization occurs at an animal's anterior end. Posterior is the opposite to the anterior end. It is the animal tail end. Other important terms of direction and terms describing the body planes and sections apply to the bilateral animals. Locating body parts relative to a point of reference or an imaginary line passing through the body. Here is the diagram showing the bilateral symmetry, planes and the terms of direction useful in locating the parts of a bilateral animal. A bilaterally symmetrical animal such as this fox has only one plane of symmetry. An imaginary median plane is the only one plane through which the animal could be cut to yield mirror images, or the mirror image halves. Here is the anterior end and the posterior end, and the lower is the ventral end and the above side is the dorsal end. Now the median plane and transverse plane and the frontal plane. This is a table 7.2 that showed the animal symmetry. What the symmetry is? The symmetry is the regularity of the form. Asymmetry is what the arrangement of body parts without a central axis or the plane is the asymmetry. That is, example is the sponges. Next is the bilateral symmetry, the arrangement of body parts such that a single plane passing between the upper and the lower surfaces and through the longitudinal axis divides the animal into right and the left mirror images, as in case of the vertebrates. Radial symmetry, the arrangement of body parts such that any plane passing through the oral aboral axis divides the animal into mirror images, as in case of the cnidarians. Radial symmetry can be modified by the arrangement of some structure in pairs or other combinations around the central axis by radial symmetry, as in case of the ctenophorans, and some anthozone and the pentaradial symmetry in the echinoderms. 7.3 Terms of direction. These terms are for locating body parts relative to the point of reference or an imaginary plane passing through the body. Here is the aboral. The end opposite to the mouth is called the aboral end. Next is the oral. These are the specific terms. Oral is what? The end containing the mouth is called the oral end. Anterior is what? The head end. Usually the end of the bilateral animal that meets its environment is called the anterior end. The end that contains the head is the anterior, and the tail end is the posterior end. Caudal toward the tail, cephalic toward the head, and distal away from the point of attachment of a structure on the body. For example, the toes are distal to the knee. Proximal toward the point of attachment of a structure on the body, that is the hip is the proximal to the knee. Dorsal, the back of the animal, usually the upper surface, synonymous with the posterior for animals that walk upright. What is the ventral? The belly of an animal, usually the lower surface, synonymous with the anterior for animals that walk upright. Inferior is what? Below a point of reference, the mouth is the inferior to the nose in humans. Superior, above the point of the reference, the neck is superior to the chest. Next is a lateral, away from the plane that divides the bilateral animal into mirror images. And medial, on or near the plane that divides the bilateral animals into mirror images. These are the important terms of direction: aboral, oral, anterior, and these are terms locating the body parts referenced relative to the reference.